When I first moved into a nursing home, I thought I was doing the right thing. I truly believed it was going to be a new chapter in my life, a place where I'd be cared for, where I could rest, and finally have less stress on my shoulders. My family had their hands full, and I didn't want to be a burden. I imagined friendly neighbors, organized activities, helpful staff, and a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. But what I didn't expect was the loneliness that crept in during the first few weeks. I didn't expect to feel like I had signed away my freedom, and I definitely didn't realize how deeply I'd start to miss my home, my routines, and the small freedoms I'd once taken for granted. Looking back now, I wish someone had told me the hard truths, not just the shiny promises that brochures and well-meaning conversations sell you. This video isn't meant to scare you or shame anyone who chooses this path. It's a life many people consider, and for some, it genuinely works. But for me, it became one of my deepest regrets. And if you're thinking about moving into a nursing home, or helping a loved one make that decision, I want to share with you 6 hard truths I learned the difficult way. These are the things no one warned me about. The things I wish I knew before I packed up my life and moved into what I thought would be a haven. So grab a cup of tea, settle in, and let me walk you through my story. 1. Lost my independence. One of the first things that hit me hard was the sudden loss of independence. I don't think I truly understood how much of my life I controlled until all of that was gone. Simple things like deciding what time I wanted to wake up, when I wanted to eat, or even whether I felt like going outside for a walk. Those choices were no longer mine to make. I remember waking up that first week and realizing someone else was knocking on my door to tell me breakfast was ready. I wasn't hungry, but I felt like I had to go anyway, like I was just another name on their checklist. It felt like being in school again, except I was a grown adult, used to making my own choices. And it didn't stop there. My schedule was no longer my own. Meals, medication, activities, they all followed a strict routine set by the facility, not by me. Back in my own home, I had little routines that gave me joy. I loved waking up late on Sundays, sipping my coffee while watching the birds from my kitchen window. I had my own space, my favorite chair, and the freedom to do things when I wanted, how I wanted. At the nursing home, that was gone. Everything had a process, a protocol, and a timetable. I felt like a passenger in my own life, and I can't tell you how frustrating it was to have to ask permission for basic things. Want to step outside? You need a staff member to accompany you. Want to take a shower at 9 p.m.? Sorry, showers are only allowed during certain hours. I understand some of these rules are meant for safety, but when every decision is filtered through a system, it chips away at your dignity. Even decisions about your own body can become communal property. One time I had a rash that I didn't want anyone to make a fuss about. At home, I'd just deal with it myself. But here, I had to report it, get it checked by a nurse, and suddenly 3 people were discussing my skin like I wasn't even there. It was dehumanizing. That kind of thing adds up. What they don't tell you is that independence is more than just being physically able to do things. It's the freedom to choose your own way of living. In a nursing home, that freedom gets trimmed down little by little, and before you know it, you're living a life that barely resembles your own. You're cared for, yes, but you're not really living in the way you once did. This isn't something you feel overnight. It sneaks in slowly. You find yourself saying, "It's fine, I'm getting used to it." But deep down, you're mourning the loss of your own authority over your life. And once that part of you starts to fade, it's hard to feel like you anymore. 2. Emotionally isolating. One of the things no one warned me about And honestly, what surprised me the most was how emotionally isolating it can be in a nursing home. From the outside looking in, you'd think being surrounded by other people your age, plus staff and caregivers, would keep you from feeling lonely. But the truth is, I felt lonelier than I ever had in my life. Let me explain. Yes, there were people around me, but it's not the same as being emotionally connected to someone who really knows you. The staff were polite and helpful, but they were also busy, always in a rush. You could tell they cared, but their attention was divided between so many residents that conversations were often short, surface level, and task-oriented. Did you take your meds? Are you going to bingo this afternoon? Need help getting dressed? It's hard to feel seen or heard when your interactions mostly revolve around routines and reminders. As for the other residents, that was another challenge. Some were dealing with dementia, some had hearing issues, and many just weren't interested in making new friends. I tried, I really did. I joined activities, made small talk during meals, smiled in the hallways. But building meaningful relationships? That was rare. Most people were in their own world, trying to cope in their own way. I started to miss real conversations, the kind where someone listens to you just because they want to, not because it's part of their shift. And it wasn't just the people inside the home. Over time, the people outside started to drift away too. At first, my family visited regularly. My kids would come by, sometimes bring the grandkids, and those visits would light me up for days. But slowly, life got busy. The visits became shorter, then less frequent. Phone calls replaced in-person chats, and even those started to taper off. I don't blame them. Life moves fast, and it's not easy to keep up with someone who isn't a part of your everyday routine. But that didn't make it any less painful. There's a kind of grief that comes with being forgotten. It's not loud or dramatic. It's quiet. It creeps in during long afternoons when no one knocks on your door. It settles in when you sit in a crowded room and still feel completely alone. And you start to wonder if this is just how the rest of your life is going to feel, like you're slowly fading into the background. What hurt the most was losing that sense of connection to who I was. At home, I had a role. I was the matriarch, the advice giver, the holiday host. I had purpose. In the nursing home, I felt like just another elderly resident in room 204. That emotional disconnect can wear you down more than any physical ailment. If you're thinking about this move, know this. Community matters. Real relationships matter. And if those connections aren't built into your daily life in a nursing home, you may find yourself surrounded by people, but still completely alone. 3. Hidden costs. If there's one thing I wish I had looked into more closely before moving into a nursing home, it's the financial side of it all. I walked in thinking everything was covered. After all, I'd done my research, asked the questions, and read through the paperwork. But nothing prepared me for the flood of hidden costs that started piling up as soon as I settled in. At first, it was small things. The facility had a list of included services: meals, laundry, basic care, and medication management. But what they don't always tell you is how much is not included and how quickly it adds up. For example, I needed to see a podiatrist after a few months because of recurring foot pain. Turns out that wasn't covered under the standard plan, and the facility charged an extra fee just to bring in a specialist. Not only did I have to pay the doctor, but there was a coordination fee on top of that. Then came the personal items. I assumed that everyday necessities, like toiletries, toothpaste, or even snacks, would be part of the package. Nope. I had to buy my own, and if I couldn't get out to a store myself, which, let's be honest, wasn't exactly easy from inside the home, the staff would charge for purchasing them for me. And not just the item. Sometimes there was an errand fee included. It started to feel like I was being nickel and dimed at every corner. I also didn't realize how quickly things like extra care services could raise the monthly bill. When I needed more help getting dressed after a minor fall, the home reassessed my care level. Suddenly, I was bumped to a higher tier of assistance, which meant an automatic increase in monthly fees. No negotiation, just a formal letter stating the change and the new amount I now owed. Even recreational activities had price tags attached. Art classes, outings, or spa services sounded nice in theory, but each one came with a participation fee. And since many of those activities were the only highlights in an otherwise monotonous routine, I felt pressured to pay just to stay mentally and emotionally stimulated. Let's not forget medications. I had always managed my prescriptions through my own pharmacy back home, but once I moved in, the facility preferred using their in-house service. The markup was shocking. I remember comparing one medication I'd been taking for years and seeing it listed at double the price. And since switching pharmacies wasn't easy in their system, I was stuck paying more unless I wanted to jump through a ridiculous number of hoops. I say all this not to complain about spending money. I understand that care costs something, but to warn others that the numbers you see on the brochure are only the beginning. What looks affordable at first can quickly become a financial strain, especially if you're on a fixed income. My advice? Read the fine print. Ask about every possible scenario. And don't be afraid to get second opinions, even legal ones, before signing anything. Because once you're in, getting out isn't as easy or cheap as you might think. Fourth, staff shortages. Another harsh reality I didn't see coming was the impact of staff shortages. Before I moved in, the facility seemed fully staffed, warm, and welcoming. They promised attentive care, personal relationships with the team, and quick responses when help was needed. I believed them. But after a few months, the cracks began to show, and I realized just how understaffed and overworked most nursing homes really are, including the one I moved into. It started with small things. I'd press the call button for assistance. Maybe I needed help reaching something or just wanted someone to walk me to the dining hall, and no one would come for 10, sometimes 20 minutes. At first, I brushed it off. They must be helping someone else, I told myself. But the delays kept happening. Then they became longer. And eventually, I started to feel like I was bothering them every time I asked for help. One night, I had severe stomach pain. I buzzed for help around 1 a.m. It took nearly 40 minutes for someone to show up. And by then, I was curled up in bed, crying, scared, and completely alone. The nurse who finally came apologized and said, "I'm so sorry, we're short-staffed tonight." I appreciated her honesty, but I couldn't help but think, what if this had been an emergency? The thing is, it wasn't the staff's fault. Most of them were kind, hardworking people doing their best. But they were stretched thin. Many were responsible for a dozen or more residents at once, with no breaks and long shifts. Burnout was visible on their faces. You could see how tired they were, how rushed their movements became, how their conversations turned clipped and mechanical. And when they're constantly playing catch-up, you, the resident, stop being a person and start feeling like a task on a never-ending to-do list. That lack of time also meant I didn't always get the quality of care I needed. There were days my bedding wasn't changed, or I had to remind someone about my medication. Once, I was accidentally given the wrong meal, and thank goodness I wasn't allergic to anything, because no one double-checked. Mistakes like that aren't just inconvenient. They can be dangerous. But when staff are overwhelmed, those mistakes become more common. Another thing that hurt was how hard it was to form real relationships with caregivers. I wanted to connect, to feel like someone actually knew me. Not just my medical file, but staff turnover was constant. 1 month, I'd start getting to know a caregiver, and by the next, they were gone. Either they quit, transferred, or simply stopped showing up. That kind of instability makes you feel like you're living in a revolving door, never able to build trust or feel secure. No one tells you how much you'll miss that basic reassurance, that when you press a button or call out, someone will come, that you're being looked after by people who aren't just filling shifts, but truly have the time to care. If you're considering a nursing home, don't just look at the rooms or the dining options. Ask the hard questions. What's their staff-to-resident ratio? What's their turnover rate? How do they handle emergencies at night? Because when the staff isn't there, or they're too tired to give you the care you need, it doesn't matter how nice the building looks. You'll feel invisible. 5. Health decline. This is probably the hardest part of my story to talk about because it still stings when I think about it. After moving into the nursing home, my health didn't improve like I'd hoped. It actually got worse. Before I moved in, I had some mobility issues, sure. I wasn't as steady on my feet as I used to be, and I'd had a couple of close calls with falls. But I was still cooking for myself, walking with a cane, managing my own medications, and doing light housework. I figured a nursing home would provide support while helping me maintain what strength and independence I still had. But instead, what happened was the opposite. I began to deteriorate, mentally, emotionally, and physically. The first thing that changed was my activity level. At home, even doing small chores kept me moving. I'd walk from room to room, tend to my plants, or take a slow stroll around the block. In the nursing home, everything was centralized, simplified, and sedentary. Meals were brought to us, laundry done for us, and most of the daily movement I used to do just disappeared. I went from walking several times a day to sitting in a chair for hours at a time. My legs started to weaken. My balance got worse. I found myself needing the wheelchair more than the walker, and eventually, I stopped trying to walk altogether. I remember one moment that really opened my eyes. I was reaching for something on a shelf, something I'd easily been able to get just a month earlier, and I couldn't lift my arm high enough. The muscle tone in my arms had weakened too. It was like my ear, and I couldn't lift my arm high enough. Gotten the message. You're done doing things for yourself now. And it responded accordingly. Then came the mental toll. I used to be sharp. Crosswords, books, journaling, all of it. But with so much time spent sitting, waiting, and doing the same activities over and over, I started to feel foggy, less curious, less sharp. The routine was so predictable that my brain wasn't being challenged anymore. The conversations were limited, the stimulation minimal, and the monotony was numbing. I started to forget names, lose track of the day, and at times even struggle to follow along in conversations. Emotionally, that decline did a number on me. I felt embarrassed, needing help with things I used to do alone. I felt like a burden, and worse, I started to feel like a shell of who I once was. That emotional weight? It only made the physical problems worse. It's a cycle. The more helpless you feel, the less motivated you are to try. The less you try, the weaker you become. And that spiral is hard to climb out of once you've fallen in. To be fair, the nursing home had physical therapy, but it wasn't personalized or consistent. I'd go maybe twice a week if I was lucky, and the sessions were rushed. There was no push, no encouragement to regain what I was losing. And when you're surrounded by others who've already given up, it's easy to do the same. The truth is, I didn't expect moving into a care facility to make me feel older, sicker, and more fragile. But it did. And if you're not actively supported, challenged, and engaged, that decline becomes your new normal. I wish I had known that going in, because maintaining health isn't just about medication or meals. It's about purpose, movement, challenge, and connection. And in the wrong environment, those things slip away fast. 6. Strict routines. If there's one thing that makes a nursing home feel more like an institution than a home, it's the rigid daily routines. I never realized how much I valued flexibility in my day until I was forced into a schedule that wasn't my own. And let me tell you, it wears you down more than you'd think. Everything was on a timetable. Wake-up calls, meals, medication, shower days, activity blocks, lights out. I understand there's a reason for structure, especially when caring for a large number of people. But when your entire life gets boxed into a preset schedule, you start to feel more like a product on an assembly line than a human being. Take mornings, for example. I've never been a morning person. In my own home, I'd sleep in a little, then take my time getting dressed and easing into the day with a quiet breakfast. But here, the lights were on early, the staff were knocking by 7:30, and I was expected to be at breakfast by 8, even if I wasn't hungry. If you wanted to eat later, too bad. The kitchen closed between meals, and you'd have to wait hours for the next one. Even things like showers were scheduled, and not always when it made sense. I was assigned 2 shower days a week, both in the afternoon, and only if staff had time to assist. Want to shower on a hot morning, or after a sweaty day? Not unless you were willing to wait or make a fuss, which, honestly, most of us didn't have the energy to do. It made me feel like a child again, waiting for permission to do something so basic. One time, I wanted to attend a virtual church service that streamed at 11 a.m. on Sundays, but that was the same time as the facility's group bingo game, one of the few fun activities where everyone gathered. When I asked if I could watch the service in the common area, I was told, "That's not the usual program, sorry." That crushed me. It was such a small thing to ask, but it didn't fit the schedule, so it didn't happen. The worst part? Over time, you begin to adapt to it. You stop asking for changes. You stop resisting. You tell yourself, it's easier this way. But inside, it chips away at your sense of self. Your preferences, your rhythms, your choices, they're all replaced by what's easiest or most efficient for the staff and the system. I missed being spontaneous. I missed making last-minute decisions. I missed changing my mind and not needing approval to do so. I missed being able to say, "No, not today," and have that be respected. In a nursing home, your day is no longer your own. It belongs to the clock, the system, and the staff. And that's something I didn't expect to feel so deeply. What I thought would be a small sacrifice for safety and support ended up becoming a slow erasure of the things that made me me. So if you're considering this step, think carefully. Ask yourself if you're ready to give up not just your space, but your freedom to choose how you live each day. Because once that clock starts ticking on someone else's terms, you'll feel it in every part of your life. Reflecting on my journey, moving into a nursing home was a decision I made seeking comfort, care, and community. However, the reality was starkly different. The emotional isolation, unexpected financial burdens, staff shortages, health decline, and rigid routines collectively led to profound regret. These experiences taught me the invaluable importance of autonomy, meaningful connections, and personalized care. For those contemplating this transition, I urge you to thoroughly research and visit multiple facilities, engage deeply with current residents, and consider alternative care options that might better preserve your independence and well-being. Remember, while nursing homes can offer necessary support for some, they may not be the ideal environment for everyone. Prioritize what truly matters to you in your golden years. If you found this narrative insightful, please like, share, and subscribe for more personal stories and discussions on navigating life's critical decisions. Your engagement helps us build a community where experiences are shared and wisdom is passed on.